So welcome everyone to the panel. We're here today to talk about how SME technology providers, including those based in the North East and our Dynamo members, are helping government agencies to innovate in the delivery of online services. So with us today, we've got Fay Cooper, who is Deputy Director of Products in a newly established digital directorate within DWP, known as Shared Channel Experience. So this directorate was established in April 2020, interesting time to establish a team. To focus on the customer experience for both claimants and agents. And Fay is a human-centered design leader. So Fay has spent her time at DWP embedding understanding of the customer throughout DWP and really focusing on giving them a voice and making sure that every digital service is aimed at meeting their needs. Since joining DWP in 2018, Fay has been the product lead for digital transformations across state pensions, pension, credit, and child maintenance services. So welcome, Fay. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Tom Lawson's joining us from Opencast, where he's the CEO. Tom joined Opencast in 2019 to develop the strategy for growth for this Newcastle headquartered, fast-growing SME technology consultancy. And Tom brings with him 16 years of experience in digital delivery and innovation solutions, having held roles at Capgemini and BT Global Services prior to joining Opencast. Tom's vision for Opencast is that he wants it to be the place for technology specialists to thrive and an organisation that clients choose to partner with because of their empowered people, collaborative working and pride in building the right things in the right way that really he believes delivers the results that clients are looking for. Darren joins us as the Chief Digital Officer of NHS Business Services Authority. He's responsible for the NHS BSA's Digital Directorate, covering operations, improvement, and the strategic direction of digital applications that support over £30 billion of financial transactions. He has created and scaled a leading digital delivery capability from an initial team of only 5 to over 120 truly multidisciplinary professionals covering software engineers, service designers, user researchers, solution architects, and many others. Darren's got extensive experience of partnerships from startups through to multinational and global scale partners. So welcome, Darren. And Andrew is the Director of Dynamo Northeast, our fantastic regional CIC with members of over 150 businesses who all share the mission to grow the region's tech economy. And Andrew is a non-executive director at Northumbria NHS Trust. Prior to this, he spent 5 years working in central government, first as a civil servant at DWP, and then at the Cabinet Office as Deputy Director of the Government Digital Service. His background is in software and technology, building on a strong computer science grounding. He's worked across industries with a particular focus on mobile and telecoms, the common theme being technology-enabled business transformation. So thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion today around SMEs and how SMEs can really help to drive innovation within government services. To kick us off, I was hoping, Fay, you could tell us a little bit about your experience working over the past, and particularly over the past year with SMEs and with all of the transformation and delivery kind of pace that's been required.
Yeah, thanks, Cate. So like you say, it's been a really interesting time. So we set up the new directorate just literally as COVID happened. So we have had to onboard a lot of people during that time. And our ambitions over that period have been really big. So we always used to work in product silos. So our whole strategic vision was around people coming to us for help for retirement or, let's say, child maintenance. But our big driver has been around creating what we call a new application reference architecture. So breaking down all of our services to their common components and starting to really build and transform services for the future. And we've been thinking about customer journeys, voice of the customer, and trying to really think about our end-to-end experience in a way that we've never done. So we couldn't do all of this ourselves. So we've had to pull on a lot of different types of extra help, I would say. So we've used a lot of big companies like Accenture, Capgemini, IBM, but we've also tried to find opportunities for SMEs. And, personally, I've worked with Word Nerds a lot. So big Northeast company. And for me, they've really, Word Nerds made a massive difference for me in helping do some social media insight analysis and bring that voice of the customer at scale, something we never had before. So that's really helped. And I think we've, stood up squads all over for technical discoveries, customer journey discovery. So lots of different types of work going on, from very technical to very user-centered. And we've, across the department, used a lot of local companies. So Scott Logic, Opencast, been a lot of big, smaller companies that we've engaged with, because to achieve the ambition, we knew we couldn't do it alone. And I think some of the smaller companies in particular have been really helpful to come to us and say, let us help you. We've got some great ideas in this space and we've thought through some of these problems. And we also, work with literally micro businesses, like 1 or 2 man, like small companies where they're specialists in their field. So some of the work we're about to launch on what we call voice of the customer. We're pulling on a few key specialists where it's around unleashing all customer satisfaction across the department. So yeah, wherever possible, we do have a mixed economy, and I think that's a really positive thing. Definitely.
Thanks. Darren, I'm sure you've got some thoughts to add to that kind of topic of what's been going on over the past year and how you've seen that landscape develop, as so much change has been going on.
Yeah, really similar to Fay, to be honest. The synergies are amazing across the different departments and directorates that we run. It's kind of a similar story. We deliver such a broad range of services to our users that we can't be the masters of everything ourselves, and we serve the whole population with some of our services, and to be able to do that, we can't do it all ourselves. So we partner with various different organisations. Again, similarly, for some of the heavy lifting and more kind of robust skills that we require, we've worked with Accenture and other large organisations. But when we need more specialist or deeper knowledge or more localized knowledge and experience, then we've definitely partnered with a lot of local small medium enterprise organizations across the sector on some of our services. And it's about that kind of having that core flex model within the organization. So we have a good, as you mentioned, good strong internal team within the organisation. I think we're at over 200 now, and we recruited 90 people during the pandemic as well, onboarded 90 people. So we're continuing to grow, but we'll always need more. We'll always need more great people to come along and support us in delivery, and we've done that on certain projects, and sometimes large projects. We've partnered with some small medium enterprises to deliver those services. We're currently working on the transformation of NHS Jobs as a platform, which is a national recruitment platform responsible for hiring hundreds of thousands of NHS employees every single year. We're working with a relatively small organisation in Different to come along and deliver that transformation for us, and working in partnership. So it's a very similar kind of experience and story, to be honest.
And I wonder if Andrew, you might want to come in here and kind of your views on when we're talking about kind of push to use SMEs, where you think that's coming from, kind of what's almost some of the policy thinking behind trying to encourage government agencies in particular to use SMEs, and what they can kind of bring into that ecosystem that maybe some of the larger corporate players struggle to do.
Yeah, I guess there's been a big push for a long time now, probably since about the sort of 2012 era, to use SMEs. But I guess I can be a little bit more controversial than some of the others here that are talking about this. I don't think the push comes from senior leaders to use SMEs at all, really, because I think there's problems to be solved, there's policy needs to be met, there's stuff that needs done, and I think when it works really well, it's because the likes of Fay and Darren and a whole load of people in other parts of public service in general are actually pushing to try and do it that way. So somebody eventually will kind of rake over your numbers and tell you what percentage of your money you spent with SMEs, but that's kind of way in the future, sort of rear view mirror kind of stuff. So I think that's something where we could legitimately sort of see a bit more challenge on that. And I think that there's a bit of a sort of following wind around it now, as I see it, because there's been just so many great innovations over the last period of time that we've all been through, where we've done stuff more quickly than ever, and there's been a sense of urgency that's kind of led to kind of us being able to get on and do some of this stuff that's needed doing for a while. So if I think back to, there's one organisation I was working with where before Christmas 2019, we were raking over and over this thing about, well, we're not sure if we can do this or not. Is it safe? Is it what we should be doing? By April, it was done. And that was the kind of pace that we, it would have taken us many years to get there. And everyone's got their story about achieving in months what would have taken years. So there's definitely that kind of thing going on. And it's a huge testament to the people who've worked on it. But I think the big thing that means for all of us now is that boards, leaders, politicians have all seen that we can actually do some of this stuff, and it's done a lot of confidence building in many cases. So I think that's a kind of hugely positive story. I think kind of underlying all that, though, we've still got a whole load of the same old problems we had before. So there's definitely a good news story around the sort of response to COVID, but there's still all the same problems that the suppliers of interesting things, or SMEs, or small products, or kind of emerging technologies still have exactly the same problems getting on the right frameworks, getting into government, where there's a whole load of potential for them, and a whole load of potential for, I'll say the Fays and Darrens are shorthand, but we know what that means, to actually buy some interesting stuff that can help solve their problems and meet what they need. And it's good for the services that you run, but it's also good being able to buy that kind of thing locally. So I guess the challenge for us is that we're still facing into a lot of the same old problems.
And Tom, kind of, I guess you've seen this now from both the kind of big organisations and now working at Opencast as an SME. I guess, what's your sense on like these different, I suppose, the different flavours of SME that exist? They can be, very product centred, or like very specialised, as Fay mentioned, or you can be more kind of multi-service, just a bit smaller, basically. And what's your sense as to kind of the best strategy there around how to kind of go to market as an SME? And to Andrew's point, what are the bigger challenges that maybe still exist versus some of those that you're starting to now see more momentum kind of getting through?
I'd probably start with some of the comments Darren and Fay made, which actually is, and controversially given the topic of this forum, but the answer isn't always SMEs. But I think the fact that the debate is now that way around is a great thing, because it probably used to be the answer was default, go to one of the big firms and that's it. I've worked in that environment. It's that, they are definitely the people to do certain things, but equally, I think now what's great is we've got, I think, buyers in, in private sector and public sector are recognizing that you need a richer ecosystem of partners to work with. And I think that's where the SMEs fit in, because then you can tap into this mix of whether it's niche specialisms in particular products, innovative kind of ideas they've come up with that might solve a particular problem, or actually just some slightly different approaches and culture that I think, particularly an SME like ours I would argue brings. And all of that in the mix, I think, helps to deliver better answers for people like Darren and Fay. And but it's neat. There's no one size fits all. There's no kind of one overarching answer that's right. But big believer in kind of that getting collaboration, the diversity of suppliers and ideas together. That's the way things seem to be moving forward. And I think we're seeing increasingly big firms embrace that. And I think the SMEs that are doing well are navigating that landscape themselves and saying, yeah, we need to collaborate. We need to come together with better joined up answers for the bigger challenges that customers are posing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Fay, I wonder if you said something interesting that I want to pick up on, which is around, sometimes it's actually the SMEs that have been coming to you sort of outside in with some of those more interesting ideas, or maybe they're things you've been thinking out as well, but you've almost gone, oh, hang on, they're thinking about exactly what I'm thinking about, and that's kind of the hook that gets you engaged. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about some specific examples of where that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that's just happened recently with, like I mentioned, we're trying to do this really big piece of work. We've got a brand new Director General, for our operational delivery, Amanda Reynolds. And Amanda's view was, when she came in, I want to know real-time customer information across every single touch point. We're not talking about just understanding a journey. We want to know across channels, everything, the whole experience. That was really exciting for us. So we did some initial work, and we did a market engagement session last week where some of the really big companies came, which we would expect, to talk about some of their really big products. But we also had quite a few SMEs talking about ideas around, I don't know, have you data modeled your customer journeys? Could you do that? And could we partner with a few SMEs? So we don't want to partner with a big company, but have you considered, what outcomes you're trying to achieve? So rather than just focus on the technology, what about the user-centered parts? So, we would fully embrace that. So we're going to put out a request for information. We've got a questionnaire, and we're encouraging SMEs to pull together. So I think wherever possible, we try and open up opportunities, and our commercial team will also coordinate conversations. So we've had some recently from data providers, all sorts really, some small consultancies come forward to say, we've done some interesting work in this space. Can we come and talk? So, our commercial team will facilitate a conversation with some of our leadership team, and then we talk about opportunities for about an hour. And then from there, we kind of go away, think about our workloads and think about how they could fit in. Because essentially our work is growing, and, the more and more our service model and design's changing, the demand on our digital services is just becoming higher and higher. So we've got about 4,000 staff now, but it's just constantly accelerating. And our ambition is really to become, and will be, I think very soon, become one of the biggest digital government services. So therefore, we just can't recruit. At the moment, we've got about, just in my area alone, around 70 vacancies that we just can't fill. Particularly, and it used to traditionally be the technical roles like architects, engineers, but we're finding out it's things like user research that just aren't enough to spread around. So, I think wherever companies can come to us, and we'll talk about the best model, is it a full team? Is it part of a team? Is it a few key roles? How would that work? And we're always trying to find the right balance, and we're trying lots of different approaches. So I think, wherever possible, we do facilitate those.
That makes sense. I've seen a few questions in the chat about procurement, and it was kind of also one of the planned topics that I know we wanted to cover. So I think one of the questions is, from a mandating kind of proportions of work that go to SMEs and like policy making in that space, do you think that's part of the solution? And Fay, you just mentioned that you've got a kind of very partnering kind of commercial team that you work with, but Andrew, maybe you could come in on that just to talk about some of the policies that have been developing. And someone specifically mentioned kind of in the US there's a mandated proportion of work. Do you think that's helpful, unhelpful? Kind of where do we currently sit in that in the UK?
Yes, there's plenty of evidence that is helpful, and so it was pushed through in quite a forward-looking way by the coalition government a while ago. And that, if you look at the kind of, it was some of the GDS folk ages ago did a sort of map of where all the pounds got spent in the UK pre-2012 and then a couple of years later. And the sort of pre-2012 was massive blob on London with a couple of the usual suspects and nothing else. And if you look at where the pounds get spent now, at least by sort of supplier head office postcode, better than nothing, then it's actually done a whole load, pulled a whole load of that spend out to the regions. So it's like the original levelling up in a way, and that was always what was in their minds when they did that. So I think there's plenty of evidence that's been successful, and it's taken some time for it to kind of play back through some of the sort of mega deals, for want of a kind of way of grouping them together, where, when some of the bigger things come around, then that percentage that's mandated to go through small and medium-sized businesses then affects the way that that those bits of work get sort of set up to buy them, and that's been a big help. So I think that's broadly a good thing. It's just kind of more of the same, please. And I think we don't really know what levelling up means now, but if you ask people, what do you think levelling up means, then if you can get them to not talk about house prices, then it's really around getting better paid jobs. And So there's clearly a way to get better paid jobs into the regions where good people can do good work on something meaningful for the likes of DWP or BSA and many others, and that's a good thing all round. So I think it's a good start, let's put it that way.
And Tom, I wonder if you can come in on that kind of idea of like, what have you seen that's changing with procurement practices kind of in the reality of going through those processes, how much time it's taking? And there's been a couple of comments around, has one of the catalysts over the last year been that streamlined procurement kind of ability, and how do we maintain the good bits of that, going forward?
I mean, I've worked with government bodies for a long time, and I definitely think procurement is improving in terms of the way they're seeking to engage and sort of solicit opinion. DWP, actually, procurement team, to give them a bit of a shout out, earlier this year did some really good engagement where they came out to understand more about, almost sort of user-centered or human-centered design around procurement for SMEs. What is it that you guys need from us? How can we make the processes work better, for organisations like ours? And it does feel like we were being listened to and could offer. And again, we can bring some observations of things that have worked well and haven't, but really sense that they want to make that process easier and want to help. I mean, the comment I just put in response to Mark in the chat around the pace bit, I do think that's a really, really key thing all round. We know when we speak with our clients in government, they're often dealing with demands that they need to respond to really quickly, and we and other organisations like us want to be set up to help really quickly, and then it can feel like procurement processes can really slow all of that down. So I think that sort of shared sense of purpose and the pace and urgency to then get those things done that offer the right level of rigour all round, because that's got to be done, is really important. But I do think that where that was done well during the COVID sort of crisis of early last year, you can really see what that enabled people to do. Lots of organisations came together quickly up and got things done. So it's that focus on pace and driving that through so that people can just move on with their lives if they're unsuccessful, or get cracking and helping where they've been successful. It's really important.
And Darren, are you feeling those sort of same changes, I guess, from your side of the fence in terms of, I'm sure that procurement can be a frustration as well for you in terms of needing to get on with things, but also needing to make sure that the right level of rigor is applied. How's it feeling from your perspective?
So I suppose the thing to call out would be that no one gets excited about running a procurement. Anyway, very people do anyway, and we'd all like it to be as quick as possible. We'd all like it to be a 10-minute thing, wouldn't we? But I think we've made massive strides in the last 10 years, even since the introduction of frameworks such as G-Cloud and digital marketplace that GDS brought in. It's just opened up the market exponentially compared to where we were, particularly for SMEs to be able to bid for those opportunities. I don't even think the opportunities would have been on some SMEs' radars previously without the great work that GDS have done. The other thing I say is I'm really fortunate to have a fantastic procurement team in the BSA, and they are embedded as part of the team. They're not a separate part of the organisation. They work collaboratively with us, and we can run procurement in less than 20 days for a fairly large MITI requirement, and even less if it's a standard G-Cloud procurement. So I think we've made absolute leaps and bounds. There's still definitely work to be done. I think particularly as Tom and Andrew have said, listening more to the voice of SMEs in how those frameworks are designed and improved and iterated upon. I did say, G-Cloud and DOS are probably about knocking on for 10 years old now, or rapidly approaching it, and they haven't really reinvented themselves in that time, and it's probably time for a little look at that and learn the lessons of what's working well and what might be able to be improved in that space to speed it up even more. So yeah, I think we're getting there, but we'll always have the hurdles or the fun of procurement that we'll have to go through. But I wouldn't say that procurement and commercial is a problem.
Okay. I guess in that sense, maybe like let's move on from procurement, but maybe it may touch on it, but what more do you think could be done to bring in kind of new players to kind of think that working with government agencies is a good idea? I don't know, Fay, whether you've got some ideas perhaps around how to actually encourage SMEs that maybe have historically kind of discounted that kind of work due to those procurement hurdles. Like what is it that might get more people interested in innovating and kind of supporting government agencies?
Yeah, and I think we're doing a lot in DWP around just making people aware of the types of things we're working on, because I guess that's part of the problem, isn't it? That what are the problems we're trying to solve? So where could they fit in? So we're starting to do a podcast. We've done about 5 so far. And I think the podcasts are really driving the different types of ambitions for each area of DWP, what we're seeking to achieve, where our challenges are. So I think for SMEs just to kind of be aware that information is starting to churn out there. And I think also not for SMEs, really a big thing would be just not to be scared to make an approach to us, because I think we do, as Tom said, we've got our commercial team now are really focused on supporting SMEs and bringing them in. So I think if people, think they can help us, if they hear something about our work, then get in touch. And also we offer lots of opportunities, in my product community, we're a big community. And we talk a lot about inviting people in to do lunch and learns. So maybe it's quite a safe space just to share a bit of this is what I'm doing, hear a bit about what we're doing. So again, I think it's just engagement for me would be a big thing, just people not to be scared to make a try.
That's a really good point around, the first interaction doesn't have to be trying to sell something, right? It can be more of an engagement just to get to know each other better. And that's a really good bit of practical advice.
Cate, could I just comment on that, just to sort of, because I think that government doesn't get enough credit for what Fay's just said. And if I think about my last job before I ended up working in central government was at O2. And just, as an example of moving from a big corporate, there's no way we'd have done blogs and podcasts about what we were up to and try to engage the supplier community in it. It was kind of we saw it as hugely commercially sensitive, incredibly competitive environment. It's almost the last thing that we would have wanted to do. And I think, even around that time, which is, starting to sound like a long time ago now in central government, there was a lot of blogging, a lot of supplier engagement, a lot of trying to alert the market to stuff. Yes, there were tons of issues with all of that. And as Darren said, there's still a lot more to do around it. But actually, I felt like government was leading the way on that and probably still is. And a lot of SMEs have kind of been put off by a bad experience. So I think, Fay is pretty approachable, but a lot of SMEs have had a bad experience working, trying to knock on the doors of other places where, you can there's a bit of a perception that you can get a lot of time wasted, you can get tied up in a load of bureaucracy. It's almost like these big, complex organisations, not necessarily just government organisations, but if you're a SME, big complex organisations can just eat up all of your time. You never get to raise an invoice at the end of it all and you end up dead in the water. So there's a real sort of frustration around experiences like that people have had. And I think, one of the things that we collectively need to do is to sort of spin that round into the positive stuff, which is if you're working on things like Fay and Darren, or you're working on really meaningful stuff where you're going to your teams, your product is going to get used in a way that can really make a positive impact, and you're going to get paid on time, and you're going to work on something where all your family's going to use it. And it's really quite exciting, actually, if you want to work on stuff like that. And why would you want to go and work in some corporate environment? So there's a real positive story about it if we can make it work. But a lot of SMEs have just had a really bad experience with the frameworks and the kind of, the sort of, maybe we'll come on to it in a bit, but they kind of don't know why they're being asked for all this stuff. But then on the other side of the fence, you go, well, we have to ask for all this stuff. And you get stuck in this kind of, it just feels like at some point you end up going, well, is it worth it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a really important point around kind of everyone empathizing on both sides as to kind of what the challenges are. And that time burn thing, I think is the one thing that is a huge difference between an SME and a big corporate. Is it's frustrating as a big organization if you burn time, but it doesn't kill you. You just kind of think, oh well, we'll move on from that and kind of let's not go and talk to them again for a while. And I think that's kind of the huge kind of piece of empathy that's required, is just to recognise almost the time preciousness of you talking to a founder of a small business versus, you know, an organisation that can afford to have business development people that are really specialised in, that's how they spend all their time. I'm conscious of time. We've got just over kind of 5 minutes left. I'd really like to ask, I think, you know, a little bit around what you think organisations like Dynamo and Dynamo specifically, kind of what the activity that we're doing, how that is actually supporting some of this sort of interaction and ecosystem building, and if there's more that we think Dynamo could or should be doing in this space. So I don't know who wants to go first. Perhaps, like Tom, you could talk a little bit about how Opencast has been involved in Dynamo clusters and how you've kind of seen some of the benefits of that as an SME, and then maybe go around the room just to hear a couple of thoughts on what's been working well, and are there things we could be doing more of to help drive the ecosystem regionally?
Yeah, I mean, back to my early opening point, I guess, about collaboration. I think the cluster model is really, really good. You know, if we bring together people with all the right mix of skills that are in region and help them to co-create better sort of creative solutions for the clients that are in the region, I think that can only be a positive thing. I think it can help with the point around Fay's point around visibility, which I think is key. You know, the departments sharing openly what their challenges are, and then the market kind of coalescing to respond to that really well, I think could be a great, you know, mutually beneficial model that addresses a number of the points that we've kind of talked about today about pace and minimising time wasted all around. So yeah, no, we're involved. We've been involved in various of the clusters. Probably the health one at the moment is one of the ones that we're more actively engaged in, and I think you see those characteristics there. You know, the opportunity for orgs that might never have met each other to come together and then start thinking about how to support in different places.
Yep, that makes sense. Darren, how is it kind of the health cluster, and I guess it's not just the health cluster for NHS BSA necessarily, but you know, what's your benefits you've had from Dynamo engagement and kind of other things we should potentially be thinking about doing more of?
Yeah, I think it's again enforcing what Andrew said earlier, you know, that around kind of demonstrating the value that the SMEs can do, and that they can do this. You know, the kind of getting people away from those traditional organisations that people may have historically commissioned in the past, and not looking beyond those big five or however many that they constantly be commissioned to do. And what Dynamo brings is a forum and a platform to be able to share the experiences and demonstrate the fantastic work that some of the SMEs can do and can deliver. And I think the more that may Fay, other leaders within the digital and technology community can kind of share those case studies and how that worked and the benefits of working with SMEs, then it'll encourage others to look beyond the traditional approach to do it and join things up and share those stories and share the different challenges. You know, we migrated off a mainframe a couple of years ago. That there was a huge monolithic beast that needed to be wrestled down and moved off. And Opencast did a fantastic job on that. We talked about culture before, and the benefit of working with an organisation or a company like Opencast and others is that they're coming in and you're creating a collaborative culture and a collaborative, and kind of, you're never going to change the culture of one of the big five. They're going to come in and do things too, rather than do things with. And it's a supplier delivery relationship rather than working with an SME. It's definitely a partnership relationship, and you know, upskilling our own people and leaving you with a legacy to be able to continue and carry things on is critical as well. Whereas traditionally, and like I say, as Andrew said earlier as well, you know, big organisations have their place, but being open-minded and more diverse in the thinking about which organisations can help is critical, and Dynamo can bring those people together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Fay, anything you want to add on around Darren's comments, or is it a similar feeling from you that you know what Dynamo really adds is that kind of access, encourages SMEs to get involved in kind of discussions maybe they wouldn't know were going on, or kind of facilitate those interactions. Is there anything else that Dynamo could or should be doing, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's it. And as Darren said, that's just key for me. Opening the opportunities and building the network is just essential. I mean, I think Darren and I once sat together at a Dynamo event, and it was probably the first time I'd met Darren. So, and then just being able to go and visit different sites, learn from each other from all different things, not just about what we're doing, but about the culture, ways of working, workspaces, how we're set up. I think all of that's really key. And I think obviously this past year has been difficult. We haven't done as much, and I think we're missing that at the moment. But I think, just to echo Darren's points about SMEs, some of the biggest things to build on what Darren said about working with an SME for me is that SMEs help us push the boundaries. They're less invested in maintaining, big relationships. They're not kind of bought into all of our different areas of DWP. So they're much more dynamic. And I think for me, that's the real value, that they encourage us to think bigger and sometimes a bit bolder than we get from some of the bigger players, which is exciting, really. So that's something we want to encourage.
Yeah, that's really, I think my two takeaways there are actually not necessarily what I expect from the conversation. It's actually like SMEs pushing the boundaries, bigger, bolder. I'm sure that the bigger players would like to think that's what they're doing, but really interesting to hear your experience saying like you often see that coming more from the dynamic crowd, and also that point around building your own capability and having that great experience of knowledge transfer. I think that's also again something that probably the bigger firms would like to think they do, but I think that I agree. I can see that the smaller firms may spend more time focusing on it, and it's more in their kind of culture and DNA. Andrew, anything you wanted to add as a kind of Dynamo cluster lead yourself? And
yeah, maybe just one thing to pick up on. It's a bit sort of drawing together just what Tom and Darren said, really, because something where we're seeing a big gap, untapped potential, let's say, around health. Like we've got a lot of SMEs and a lot of public service people who are sort of interested in the health sphere. It's somewhere where there's boundaries to be pushed. There's a lot going on in the area, but it's not something where the tech or the SME community is particularly connected with the health system in the area, or it has in sort of certain very specific ways, like around kind of, particularly very sort of pharmaceutical kind of things or whatever, but it hasn't in what we'd sort of broadly kind of have as the tech community around this. And I think there's a real job for Dynamo around the sort of translation between those two communities. And it's funny because there's a lot of people who are part of the tech community in the region who found themselves here because they're married to someone who works in the NHS, not necessarily an orthopedic surgeon, but there's some folks as well. And so, there's all these family ties and all of this kind of, people move here because health, but then I don't think we've done as much as we could around linking up the sort of SMEs and all of the good things that we've talked about in the region with the particularly trusts and other health providers in the region. So I think that's where we're finding there's just a completely different language that these organisations talk, and I think there's a role for Dynamo in the middle to almost sort of broker some of that. So we're trying to do that when we get into things like new sort of integrated care systems set up where there's like an opportunity to intervene at that point, and we're kind of trying to do some translating around that, and we're seeing it's kind of worlds apart, but I think we can bring those together a bit, so that could be good.
Yeah, no, that sounds like another kind of really valuable activity, like you say, is kind of making that market more efficient, really, between what buyers are looking for and what really capable SMEs can do, but it's actually a kind of translation approach. Very good. I'm conscious we're actually 2 minutes over, and I'm sure people want to get on to other sessions. So thank you all very much for joining us. I think it's been a really fantastic session. Thank you to everybody in the chat who's been asking questions and making comments. If I didn't manage to get to your question, apologies. Do obviously feel free to try and connect with these guys outside of the session. But yes, thank you all for listening, and hopefully see you in another session later on.